An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love?
They say we evolved, but look around you, it's kinda clear that we all devolved. Selfish thoughts rule the walk of mankind. Now he's blind, and he can't see God. They cast away all the prophets, and God watches while the clock ticks, winding down, winding down, winding down, winding down to the ground. It's kinda clear that we lost it, and now we're trying to avoid it. But what are we trying to avoid? Could it be God? Could it be God? God's love is never ending. God's love is never ending. God's love is never ending. Could it be God? Could it be God?
An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love? An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love?
An evolutionist will call this ridiculous, and I could look at his face and tell that he's sick of this. We try reasoning, but his brain is stuck in stiff rigamortis, twisted and bitter like licorice. I made a list of simple reasons that I can't accept evolution, besides my instinct and common sense. The fossil record, why is it that before you get to fully developed animals, there ain't no ancestors? Look at the plants, brethren, look at the flowers and how beautiful they are. Some have no evolution documented. There ain't enough time, even if the universe is 15 million years young, for you to get to know life to everything we see. Only show inside of the story in all the universities. Mercy me, professors with PhDs preaching trying to kill God, blind mercenaries. What came first, DNA or the protein? How do you get life with no genetic code, please? When did order come from an explosion and interdependent parts come together? But oh man, before you give an example, remember there's no intelligence at all. And last but not least, you say survival of the fittest, but I know a man who died for me. His name's Jesus.
An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love? An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love?
Jesus was actually the vehicle, the conduit through which God created. Notice that again in verse 3. It says, all things were made, what's that word there? Through or by Him. So Genesis 1:1 affirms that God is creator, and John 1:1 affirms that God created, and the conduit or the vehicle, the mechanism through which He created was Jesus Christ.
An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love? An evolutionist would call this ridiculous. An evolutionist would kiss niggas in the face. An evolutionist would flip who cares what evolution is? What is love?